Three presenters who will do the presentations. The first speaker will be the Xiang, our um, VR developer. Second speaker will be our Megan Armstrong, clinical research coordinator team lead, and I will present some information from our clinical trials. John, why don't you take it over from here? Megan will help us to move forward the slides. John.
Sounds good. Thanks, Henry. Yep. So there's our declaration of conflicting interests, that we don't have any. So I'm going to talk just about the development of this application.
John,
Yes.
before you talk, let's check with the planner to say how many minutes we have. We were told we have 45 minutes, but on the agenda, we only saw 30 minutes for our group. Can anybody confirm how much time do we have?
Yeah, 45 should be good.
Okay, go ahead.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. So Megan, you can go ahead and advance the slide. Right, so VR-PAT is what we're covering today, and we develop a lot of VR applications at Nationwide Children's Hospital. This one in particular, and all of these are developed in-house, of course. Virtual reality pain alleviation therapy is what the PAT stands for at the end, and it's a serious game used to distract patients during painful procedures, specifically targeting pediatric patients that are having burn dressings changed. The primary gameplay, so my angle here is the developer, so I'm going to talk about the gameplay and the designs we made. The gameplay inside of the experience is a time-based token search and collect. So the kids are looking for tokens. In this case, that's little ice crystals. And if they focus their gaze on them to select the crystals, their score goes up, the temperature inside of the environment goes down. It's very Snow World plus, for those of you who have been doing this sort of VR development for more than a decade. All movements of the players also move through a kind of snowy environment land, and it's all on rails, automatic movement inside of a boat. So that's just the general idea of what that looks like. So from a technical standpoint, thanks Megan, the project was originally developed in the Unity game engine and deployed on iPhones through Google Cardboard. So this made the experience very widely accessible, was a great proof of concept, but it provided some limitations that eventually encouraged the team to switch over to a more dedicated standalone VR headset. And we're using the Pico Neo 3 Pro, which is pictured there on the bottom right. So unlike a smartphone, this headset is designed exclusively for VR experiences, which means that the graphics are going to be better, the motion tracking is faster, higher refresh rate, the battery lasts longer, and we have high fidelity of motion tracking, which is less of a concern in this particular case, but just to give you a general idea of why a dedicated VR headset is generally better than smartphone VR, except that smartphone VR is very widely available. We can go to the next slide. So with this application in particular, we encountered some really great and surmountable design challenges. So the first one that I want to talk about is just this challenge that these procedures are pretty quick, 5 to 10 minutes. The patient needs to be engaged very quickly. So we had to create something that was easy to pick up, but still engaging enough for them to be interested in playing it through for the entire duration of their burn dressing change. And so one of the ways that we try to achieve this engagement is to show them that ever-changing environment, where so the user is sitting in a boat, as I described before, moving through a sort of wintry environment, snowy land, calmly floating through this environment. But the trouble with any kind of motion inside of VR is that you risk inducing virtual reality sickness. So to overcome this challenge, we created that locally static object, the boat. So it's somewhere for the user's eyes to rest while they're moving. And it's also all of the movement that happens inside of that experience is going to be slow and steady with no sudden acceleration, deceleration, or rotation. So all of those movements are very predictable, very even, and they have that place for their eyes to rest so that it just reduces the chance of motion sickness. If somebody's prone to it, it's going to happen. But anyway, right. The other kind of challenge here with this easy to pick up but still engaging for the long term is that pediatric patients encompasses a very broad range of ages from 5 up to 18 and even older, if depending on comorbidity. So to create something that's accessible and fun for kids of all of those ages is a fairly big challenge. But thankfully, the novelty of wearing a VR headset is engaging enough as a baseline. So, right, most kids don't necessarily engage with VR, and most of the patients that we engage with anyway in Ohio aren't wearing VR headsets every day, so it's still somewhat of a novel experience. So right away, that engages them. But then we've also aimed to design something that's interesting to look at. So like it's brightly colorful, not too childish, but still bright and colorful and engaging enough that kids of all ages can kind of appreciate the aesthetic. Right, but then we also made the game so that it's easy enough for kids to get, right, just to get over that first hurdle of what am I supposed to do, how does this work, but then the game gets harder for kids who are older or doing well at that particular game. So this other challenge that we had was that originally the game was designed just for kids that are in a seated position, but a lot of kids getting burn dressing changes have to lay on their backs. So we had to make something that was visually interesting to look at from both of those positions. So we added branches that extend over the river, some colorful stringed lights and bird movements so that the kids aren't just staring at like a wide open sky. Yeah, this was a fun one. So kind of right away, we got feedback from the nurses about a particular visual element in the game. You create this sort of wintry experience where there's trees and rocks and water, and naturally there's maybe a little cave, and inside of that cave, what did we think would be fun to include but a little campfire? Turns out that any imagery that includes a flame could be triggering to children with burn dressings that have burn injuries that they're getting treated for. So, I mean, this is the key value of having an interdisciplinary collaborative team that does a lot of testing internally before this thing goes very public. So that fire was turned into a little mushroom circle instead. Another feature that we included for the clinicians was there are buttons that are built into the side of these headsets, and they can be used to, we designed it so that they can be used to restart the application if the patient has a problem or if the application encounters an error, that all of that can be done, all of those controls can be done outside of the headset so they don't have to take it on and off over and over again, which can be kind of, which is just like a ease of use feature that we included. All right, next slide, Megan. And last but not least, I'm just going to go over three sort of novel game design elements before I hand it over to Megan. Right, so I think I've mentioned most of these already, but one of those design features that we included was the game difficulty balancing system. So the patient is collecting these little crystals that are floating in front of them. At first, the crystals are large, they hang out for a while before they disappear. It's very easy to do, and if the patient collects a number of them easily without missing too many, the game will automatically start to show smaller crystals that are a little bit harder to hit. And if they're still doing well, they further are included, the game then includes these even smaller red crystals that orbit the spawn points, so they're moving around in space, which makes it even harder, which is great. But if like a younger patient or a patient who has trouble moving their head isn't doing so well, the game will automatically then ramp back down to introduce those easier to hit crystals, because the point of the game isn't to challenge them to the point of frustration. It's really just to keep them engaged, have them doing something that's pulling them away from that engages their brain in a way that they're not paying attention to the pain. So this other design challenge that I talked about earlier, where the patients have to lay down or sit up, we can't have, originally these spawn points were just static positions spread across the environment, but we switched that to being kind of locally spawned depending on where the patient's head is oriented. So if they're sitting upright, the spawn points are directly in front of the boat. If they're laying down, it spawns above them. And in that design process, we created a little tool for visualizing how many of those spawn points there are, where they are relative to the view of the VR headset. This is, again, just to accommodate these different positions that the user might be seated in. And last but definitely not least, whenever I make any kind of VR application, it's important to me to think about introducing this like sense of wonder, but also considering engagement beyond just that first play. So there are little hidden interactive items scattered throughout the environment that have no effect on the score or the temperature. It's just like a fun little thing that a kid might discover. And that kind of engages their curiosity, their sense of exploration. But then, I mean, in the demos that we've run for non-patients, it ends up creating this sort of communal engagement. So one user says to another, "Oh, did you notice that when you focus on the snowman's top hat, it pops off of his little head?" "Oh no, I didn't notice that." And then it makes them kind of curious about what else there might be to find on subsequent engagements with the application. And that kind of covers my overview of the game design and development. And I will hand it over to Megan to talk more about the study. Clinical input. Yep, thanks.
Thanks, John. So my name is Megan. I've been around and done the patient recruitment for all of our VR studies. So thought I'd just take a moment to talk about some of our clinical implementation. So our VR PAT has been implemented for research primarily, but also as a QI project at several clinical locations here at Nationwide Children's Hospital, as well as other sites. Here at Nationwide, it started as a research project in the outpatient burn clinic during outpatient burn clinic dressing changes. It then got expanded. Now we're in the dermatology laser clinic doing a research study. And we've also using the smartphone-based version for at-home burn dressing changes for parents and children to implement themselves. Research at outside sites has been at the Ohio State University inpatient burn unit during admitted burn dressing changes among adults, and also Parkland Health in Texas. They're our second site for our at-home VR study. And then based on our publications on these research studies, some clinical teams have reached out to us asking if they could have one of our VR headsets for their clinic to use kind of in conjunction with the iPads. So that was the outpatient burn clinic. The emergency department used it during a lot of waiting in the ED. And then the orthopedic clinic has been using it for pin pulling procedures. Additionally, the OSU ED has reached out about possibly using it. We don't have a full plan in place yet, but also Children's Memorial Hermann Hospital in Houston, Texas. A nurse practitioner reached out about using it for a QI project for her graduation requirements. So one of the major things that John also touched on, but is our our large research team. So clinical engagement has been very important, and it's very important to link in that clinical team early in the game development as well as the grant development. They're the experts on the treatment plan, the patient flow, the patient population, and have given us a lot of good feedback about game content, like that bonfire John mentioned. They also help us a lot with whom to approach, when it's appropriate to approach for recruitment. And again, people have reached out to us about other conditions that would be appropriate beyond burn dressing changes. And that's how we've gotten involved in some of our other research studies. Clinical buy-in or a clinical champion just makes the whole process so much easier. Our burn clinic nurses are wonderful and amazing. They really make fitting into their clinic flow very easy. They often get patients excited before we come in the room, which helps with recruitment after they've been there for a long clinic visit. And we also definitely recommend game demos for anyone who may come in contact with the VR, whether they're directly involved in the patient flow process or like some of our ED recruitment, just people who work in the ED and may get questions about it are very interested. The more people who know about us and the VR have made it a lot easier for us to achieve our recruitment goals. And then another thing we're definitely considering is a group authorship. So many people are involved with the implementation of VR research beyond just those people who are on the grant or involved in writing a manuscript. So we feel that group authorship can be very helpful in recognizing all of these people's involvement. And then patient and family engagement has been very important to us. Again, patient feedback on the game content. We always incorporate questions about what they like, what they don't like, what was too hard, any comments for improvement. And we've definitely made some game changes based on these insights, like making the crystals progressively harder that was feedback from some of our gamers. Also, with the patient and family engagement, considerations need to be made for data collection. Our on-site studies have been much easier to recruit and retain our patients versus our at-home studies. People forget to bring their surveys back. It takes longer to get them back. We've been working on some potential incentives to achieve these goals, but definitely considerations for your data collection should be made based on where your research is taking place. And then obviously inclusion and exclusion criteria. There are some specific criteria related to VR. These have been talked about already today, but specifically for our research in the burn world, they can't have a burn on their face, head, or neck that would the VR would rub against, or it would just make it impossible for a dressing change. Our game only requires very slight head movements, but that would be enough to make changing the dressing difficult. We did make an adjustment for patients who need to lie on their back, but when they need to lie on their stomach, it is still a bit of a challenge to play the VR. There's other obvious exclusions like seizures, migraines, people very prone to motion sickness, though John put a lot of thought into our game development. It doesn't seem to be quite as big of an issue. And then some people just don't want their eyes covered. They want to see the procedure, see what's happening. And so it's just not appropriate for those kiddos. And we've found that pediatric patients tend to be more interested than the adult patients when we are conducting our burn studies. And then just a quick note on multi-site studies. Anyone who's done them knows communication is key. Early, constant, ongoing, frequent communication. For institutions that can use them, a single IRB is very effective. It's not possible for all studies or all institutions, but it can really streamline the process. It does often require more work up front, even before the grant's submitted. But it does ensure all the sites are working under the same requirements and the documents are standardized. And then we just make a note to consider your data collection again and your randomization processes. Here we use REDCap. It works really well for our multi-site studies, but it takes quite a bit of thinking before you start your study on how everyone's going to use in the REDCap. Paper instruments are used for some studies. It just depends on who your patient population is and where you're collecting your data. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Xiang, and he can talk about our results.
Thank you very much. I want to give you some background information about where we started and trajectory of our studies. Actually, we started thinking and planning for this VR pad around 2015. And then after the game was developed, we got internal funding and other small grant to launch pilot projects. And then later on, we got a large grant currently is looking at the effectiveness of virtual realities for pain alleviation during at-home dressing changes. Today, what I will share with you, some of them are already published in our papers in German Open Network, and there's another pilot study manuscript published by Megan as the first author and our team. A third one just came out from the +1 Digital Health. Look at the lessons we have learned from our adult population studies during the COVID-19. So the first, today our focus, share some of the information I have published. This is the outpatient clinical study design. This is a randomized three-group control, three-group studies. We have recruited a total of our 90 peoples. Our original plan, we will have VR PAT active VR group. These children were actually actively interact with the VR PAT. The first control group we call the passive VR. Those children watch the exact same VR game, but they do not have these interactions. The third group is the standard care group. We use that as a control. Okay, so next, please. So from these slides, you can see we have this observed pain score by our researchers and the self-reported overall pain score by the patient and the worst pain score by the patient during the procedures. You can see our VR is very effective to significantly reduce the overall pain and the worst pain. Also, you notice here, our active VR is more effective than a passive VR, and then passive VR is more effective than control. So we have that patterns here. So that made us wondering, what are the key features of VR, active VR and the passive VR actually make it effective? Next, please. So we sort of think about, we hypothesize the potential pathway of which VR key features and pain reductions. In our study, luckily, we collect information about the participant reported key features of VR. They reported their score about the fun, engaging, and VR game realism. And we also collect information about time thinking about pain during the burn procedures. So you can see we thought when we build this potential pathway, we have that attention distraction theory in mind. If those three key features like fun, engaging, via realism really distract the kids' attention from the medical procedures, they are less likely to thinking about the pain during the procedure because they are so busy in playing the game or watch the game. They have less time thinking about the pain. Because they have the less time thinking about the pain, their self-reported overall pain score or worse the score will be affected by that. Next slide. Potential pathway of our analysis model, we have the three groups. Active VR, we have actually end up have 31 patient. We have passive VR group 30%, and we have a standard care of group. Engaging, fun, and game realism, we use a numeric score from 0 to 100 and ask the patient to report their experience after they have played our game during the medical procedures. We also ask them use the numeric score from 0 to 100, the time thing, time of the time they have thinking about the pain during the medical procedures. And then we have a self-reported pain score. We use the numeric score from 0 to 100. This slide actually is in our paper and review. You can see we compare the active VR and passive VR. We show this data point to some potential key features of active VR that makes the active VR more effective than passive VR. Okay, next please. And then we did some logistical regressions that old traditional way thinking about the statistical method of thinking about pain during the burn dressing and self-reported pain and worse pain. You can say there's a strong association between, thinking about the pain during burn dressing and the self-reported pain. That sort of like support the attention distraction theories in our field. Yeah, next slide. And then we use the logistic regression to look at the key features, game realism, game fun, and the game engagement, and then look at odds ratio of overall pain versus the pain. These also point to not only the attention distraction theories here. I will talk a little bit later, but also there's a potential, pain reduction pathways. We compare the active VR and the passive VR. We do say some difference in terms of VR game fun between passive VR and active VR. And next, please. Okay, here is the path analysis of VR features and the time think about during brain dressing change. We sort of put the time think about pain as the intermediate variables that will be affected by having fun and engaging, and then players' gender and age may also impact their VR experience. So that's the sort of our pathway analysis. This shows that actually, girls are more likely to having fun in our VR game. And interestingly, you can see here, time thinking about pain, it's a positive relationship to the self-reported overall pain, but engaging is a negative significant associations. Okay, and then here we put the VR realism. VR realism has a significant impact on whether the players having fun or whether they view this VR is engaging or not. Most important here, you can say, after we put all this together, considered all of these key features, time thinking about pain together, and self-reported thing, after we consider impact, direct and indirect impacts, engaging, game engaging is still significant after we consider time thinking about the pain. Okay, next please. And we look at the age factors in this. Although there's some relationship, but between the aging and having fun and engaging, but there are no significant difference among those different age groups. Okay, this is the fun part. We evaluate the 3 key features VR and also the intermediate factor time synchron during brain dressing changes. We evaluate their direct impact on the self-reported pain and indirect effect on the self-reported pain. Very interestingly, you can see here, VR engagement has a significant negative direct effect on the self-reported pain, and the total effect is significant. Time thinking of the pain during brain dressing changes also has a positive significant direct effect and the total effect. VR reasoning has a significant indirect impact on the self-reported pains, which means you can say what I interpret this result is actually, okay, time think of pain during brain dressing change really support the attention distraction theories. After we consider that, we still have this VR engagement has negative significant impact, and that impact actually, the total impact actually is bigger than the time think of pain during the brain dressing changes, which suggests in addition to the attention distracting theory, there may be some neural mechanism happening in the player's brain area, which will help them processing the pain signals and sort of like create some sort of like a downward pain control mechanism, so they feel a significant less pain if they are so engaged in the VR current. But I want to stop here, actually say, although there are so many publications about the observed pain, self-reported pain in clinical trials, but the underlying mechanism is still not well understood. Okay, next please. Okay, in summary, so VR PAD was effective in reducing self-reported and observed pain during brain wound care at the outpatient burn clinic. Nurses also report that VR PAD could be easily implemented in their clinical practices. We actually, as Megan has reported, other clinical divisions reach out to us and implement that. They are very excited. We have preliminary data. Actually, it works very well for orthopedic pinpointing, kids love it, family love it, and doctors love it. And we have EDs. People had reported very good results from there, and we didn't see any technical issues when they actually. We have this hands-off approach. It's like, okay, we installed VR pad into the peritoneal, handed the peritoneal to them, and then the clinic unit keep the peritoneal in their unit, and when they use that, we are not we were not there. So it's the hands-off approach. That's actually close to the real-world clinical practice, right? So when they actually need to use it, they pour out the peritoneal VR pad and turn on the button, and it automatically enter the VR pad game model. Okay, next, please. Key features of VR game had a significant impact on self-reported pain reduction during brain dressing changes. For future research, I think not only our group but other people needs to working hard to have a better understanding of the underlying mechanism of VR for pain management. I use the analogy to say, okay, you have a car running on the road, but what's the underlying? What's the behind this, and what's the underlying mechanism that move the car? We must in order for our field to move forward and to advance scientifically, we have to identify the underlying mechanism of VR effectiveness for pain alleviations. Okay, next, please. I want to acknowledge a lot of people who actually involved in developing, testing, and retesting of our VR pad, and also particularly the funding agencies for supporting our studies.